We are on day 5 of the Empower, Ignite, and Soar Character Summit. My name is Maria Dismondy. I'm a children's book author, and I'm the host of the summit. And today we have a speech and language pathologist, Becca. I call you Becca, but you're Rebecca Eisenberg. Rebecca Eisenberg, who is also an author and someone that I have been working with, which has been really exciting. So welcome, Becca.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And tell us a little bit more about what you do. And I know you have a very diverse background as far as speech and language, but currently what are you doing for speech and language?
Well, I've been working for about 18 years with children and adults with complex communication needs. So I work with children and adults who can't use speech for communication.
Okay. And you have been in private settings, but right now you're in the public school settings, correct?
Yeah, mostly schools and clinic. I've been in all different preschools, so all different settings.
Very cool.
Time that I've been working. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we've actually learned in the summit, we had an educator who has been teaching for, I think, like she said, 31 years. And we also had an author who created the intentional bookshelf, which is, just bringing in your values into the books that you read. So both of those speakers talked about the importance of literacy and talked about the importance that literacy brings language into your home. And just based on your background, I'm so excited for our talk today because you're going to talk about the importance of how parents can be helping their children to develop language with simple activities that we add to our daily routines, right?
Exactly. So that's why, because I know we're all busy and we have very busy schedules. So what I really want to talk about today was how can we fit in literacy and language into a routine that's already established? So you don't have to develop a new routine. You could, just kind of fit it right in there. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. And I'm going to have you get started, but beforehand, I'm just going to share a short story. So in the car, we're a big music family, and typically in the car, we don't listen to music because the kids are talking and it's a good time for conversation. But the other day I was tired and I just wanted to jam to some tunes. And my son, who's 4, said, "Mama, turn off the music. Let's have a conversation." This is what my 4-year-old said. And to me, it's very normal because he's my buddy and we talk a lot and we're always, discussing things. But then we had his parent teacher conference and I was so excited to hear that he is a conversationalist and he can hold conversations and use eye contact with his teachers. And I thought, yay, buddy, because I know in order for our kids to be able to talk to adults, they need to be talked to. So, aha moment for me. That was awesome. And after a whole week of doing interviews, I wanted to share a positive story because after some of these interviews, I'm like, I need to work on my parenting. It's been eye-opening. So, Becca, this is going to be enhancing your talk. Talk to us about facilitating language in the home.
And actually, when you're talking about conversation, that is one of the things when you're sitting, you're having dinner. Sometimes it's hard, especially I think as the kids get older, to facilitate the conversation when you say, well, how was school? And they just say good, and you're trying to expand on it. And so that's why I like to use books during mealtime, because I think sometimes, at least like in my situation, we always read during mealtime, is that, sometimes the conversation doesn't go as far as I want it to go. So when I'm reading a book, a lot of times I'll try to pick a book that's relevant to maybe what's going on with my kids or what's going on with me or what's going on to the topic that I want to discuss with them. And then it will start a conversation that we might have not had without the book. So and I started reading during mealtime when I have 2 children, when they were very little. I would say when they were maybe 6 months. Since they were babies, I started.
So what does the logistics of it look like? Okay, they're, let's say they're 2 and 4, they're sitting down for breakfast. Yeah. They have their breakfast in front of you. You sit down and you have a story.
Exactly. And I started it because I found that it was hard for, let's say, my kids to sit down and to focus and to eat. And they were just constantly distracted. So I said, okay, well, everyone's already sitting. This is a good time to get some reading done. And I love to read books. So I just started and I noticed that, my kids were eating better because they were focused on the book. And it was a great time for us to bond. And as a speech pathologist, I just love to, talk about language and to, I love children's books. So it was just a great way for all of us to be able to bond together. And, and it's really become a routine in our house that every time we sit down for dinner, we have a kind of a stack of books. And usually a lot of times I'll let my kids choose which books they want to read. So sometimes if they're bringing a book from the library, then maybe we'll read that book. Or maybe I have a new book that I want to read. And I always give them a choice, because I think that's a big thing, is that we want to give, as far as motivation to read, we want to read stories that are interesting and that I think, and sometimes that are relevant to what's going on in their lives. So I know it's hard because people have children that are different ages. And so what I'll do is let's say I'll read the book, but I might modify it according to the age. So I might ask, let's say, my younger child more simple questions, but I might ask my older child more like reflection questions that, let's say, should do more in school and, more, so I think it's a trial and error type thing that you have to, that as you're reading, you're going to have to, and I'll talk today a little bit about some strategies to use.
That's wonderful. And what comes up when I'm listening to you is the fact that just a few years ago, our dinner time, because I'm really big on everyone sitting down for dinner, our dinner time would last like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Because having a 2-year-old, it's like he eats something and then he's like trying to run around, and I sit back down, and he's like, I'm done. And I can see how this would really set a different mood for the family, and how it could go from 6 minutes to maybe 15 minutes.
Exactly. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, okay, and they'll say I'm done. And I'll be like, well, actually, I didn't finish my book yet. So we need to finish the book, and then we're done with our dinner. And a lot of times they'll eat more because they're a lot of times with kids, they just say they're done when they're probably a little bit more hungry. So they tend to eat a little bit more, and then we have an extended dinner time. And one of the things I know people have asked me, well, how do you eat when you're reading? And so I know logistically, it might be challenging, but a lot of times what I'll do is let's say I'll eat first, or I'll eat a little bit, and then I'll read some of the story. And then maybe I'll eat a little bit more. Or sometimes I take a pause. Or if you have a challenge with that, as far as like reading and eating at the same time, because we don't really want to do that, is that you could also start with snack time. Where you're having a small snack, or you could, a lot of times I read during breakfast time. Because I know in different households, you may eat breakfast at different times, depending on.
I eat lunch and dinner with the kids, but hardly ever breakfast, because it's such a busy morning. between making lunches and getting everyone's making sure they're getting ready. So I love the idea of starting small with a snack time throughout, as the kids are younger, and then you could incorporate it into a larger meal like dinner. So let's move on and talk a little bit about expanding vocabulary. How can we do that by reading with our kids?
Okay, so as you're reading the book, one of the things that I think to really think about is, what words does my child understand? So a lot of times they can kind of guess within the context of what that word means. So we don't want to read the story and then it become distracting where you're constantly defining words. But what you want to think about are what words are most important in the story. And those are the words that you really want to focus on and define. So a lot of times, let's say when you're reading, we don't want to constantly ask tons and tons of questions. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be reading a story and we'll say a word, and then I'll say, okay, this word means, and then I'll define it, and I'll just keep reading.
That's
and
great.
other times you could say, you can even open up a conversation where it's a little maybe more abstract word. You can say, well, what do you think that means? So a lot of times I think when we're talking to children or young children, or even children with speech and language disabilities or delays, sometimes we assume that they know what the words are, but a lot of times they don't. So, and that could also affect their comprehension of the story if they don't really know what the word is. So, and another thing is also repeated readings. So if you're repeating a story, you read it once, and I know kids like to hear stories over and over again.
So Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So a lot of times, you read the story, and then maybe the second time, encouraging your kids to say, well, what does that word mean? Because a lot of times we just assume it. So I also do that. And one of the big things too is to use the vocabulary outside of the story, or try to relate the vocabulary word to something that's going on with them. So that's what I'll do. Instead of, like, let's say, they don't understand the definition, I'll use it in a way that they could understand.
Okay, so, that's excellent. This is great. And let's talk a little bit about, so you're having these read alouds and the children are bringing in language. They're learning new words. They're having conversations with you that may have been shut down by just the simple question of what did you do at school today? So they're having more fruitful and engaging conversations with you. How can we now empower the children throughout those read alouds?
Well, I think that there's just, the books that say that you write are very empowering.
And you.
But so using books that I think, to me, it's like always about, choosing a topic that you want to discuss that will relate to something in school. So let's say, I don't know, let's say someone's bothering them in school, okay, and they're getting, let's say, if it's bullied or they're getting teased, I might, let's say, read a book about, let's say, that character getting teased and what did they do or how do they feel. And I think it's also about developing empathy, because a lot of times kids have trouble expressing their feelings, and they don't. A lot of children also, like any sort of speech and language delays or issues with communication, is that they don't really have the words to really express how they feel. So they can't. A lot of times, kids just can't express when they're sad or when they're frustrated or they're feeling lonely, because they just don't have the words for it. So a lot of times I just use books to really work on that, and I'll label that feeling. So let's say in like the book, like The Invisible Boy, where he feels
like Trudy Ludwig, right?
Yeah. And that, but he feels lonely, and he feels left out. And then as the story progresses, he feels more included and he feels happier because of that. So there's a lot of language and there's a lot of different things you could discuss. So that's just one example. But, a lot of times, like let's say for my daughter, I'll use The Good Night. I had it written down over here. The Good Night Stories for the Rebel Girls. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So, and she's older, so she's almost 10. And so that was really cool, because I think she really liked hearing about these empowering women that were doing all these different things. And I just think, it depends on what you're angling or how you want to empower your child. Do you want to empower your child to, to stand up for themselves and to be able to, let's say if they're teased, maybe using books like you write, or is it maybe that they want to be a certain profession, they want to be a doctor,
and an astronaut.
So maybe you're reading about, let's say, somebody who did that, or maybe somebody presents with a certain disability, and we're going to read a book about a character with that disability and how they overcame it. So I think it just kind of depends on, more individual, because everyone has different goals and different aspirations and things that they're working on. So
fantastic. This is great. And as we wrap things up today in the next few minutes, you actually have something, a freebie for our live viewers. Anyone who is tuning in within the first 24 hours, there will be a link in the comments below. Tell us a little bit about it. It is the Mealtime Conversation Starter Cards. I think this is probably one of my favorite giveaways.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, it kind of brings up what you were talking about with dinner, is that a lot of times, even when I'm sitting down for dinner and say, how was school? Good. Okay, so who'd you play with at recess? Those kind of questions. So, although that is one of the questions on there. But a lot of times we just need ideas because we're busy and we're tired. And if we're making dinner, we're cleaning up. Sometimes it's just nice to have, cards on the table where you could you could participate. They could choose a card. They could maybe, instead of you asking them, if you have more than one child, that child could ask, let's say, their sibling a question.
Fantastic. So you just go to the link below, you click on it, put your email in, and you'll get, is it a PDF? And then you can print out the cards, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and it could also work on, as far as like literacy goes, you want to work on, let's say, your child's reading. So maybe them even reading the cards and asking their sibling a question could also be helpful. Mm-hmm.
And I do want to bring up one more point. So talking about these empowering books and books that teach, I know the importance of a real book. I love having real books. However, I think that our homes need to have some real books in them. But for the purpose of what you're talking about, maybe a mealtime book or snack time book, check out YouTube, because I've written 9 children's books. And what I've done is I have met so many children at the schools I go to, and kids will come up to me and say, Miss Maria, my mom wouldn't buy me a book. And in my head, I'm like, I get it. Like, it's financially, not everybody can buy a $10 book. So what I started doing was reading my books and offering them for free on YouTube. So the kids can see the pages being turned, they can hear the story. And it's me. It's me. I'm the one providing it. I'm giving that away to people. So I think, now here's the illegal part, is there are some people who actually read other people's books. And I don't think that that's really, I think that's like not really cool. But if you search on YouTube, a lot of times authors or other people will read books and you can have free access to that. That's my point of this. Let's say your child is, maybe somebody's new coming to your child's classroom and they have a special need, and you really want to like give your child a little bit of an insight as to what it means to be friends with a special needs child, and that they're just like anyone else, and what you can do for them. Pull up a book on YouTube. You don't need to run out to the library. I know everybody is so busy, and see if you can find a book there. So that's a nice option.
No, I like that. And also, maybe it's like we're talking about the logistics of eating. That would be a good time for you to eat. And then you would play the book on YouTube. And then when the book is over, that's the time to discuss the book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think in today's digital world, there's no excuses, families. There are no excuses. There are resources that are out there for us that are free. And now Rebecca has given us a way to incorporate reading that is not in the nighttime when you're falling asleep, at 9 o'clock, putting them to sleep or what have you. You've given us a really great way to incorporate that language and that literacy into meals. So thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome.
Okay.
All right, signing off.
Okay, bye.
Still going. Oh, okay.